Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. A plan to put the Chicago's top financial officials on the hot seat today fizzles. What we learned about the city's finances at that meeting. President Trump reignites unfounded claims of election fraud, calling for more federal power in state elections. And self-driving cars may be coming to Illinois. How a pilot program may pave the way for autonomous vehicles. First off tonight, a push by critics of Mayor Brandon Johnson to put the city's top financial officials on the hot seat fizzled today at City Hall. As turmoil continues to swirl around the city's finances, Acting Chief Financial Officer Stephen Mahr defended the decision to delay part of an extra payment to the city's pension funds.
So for 2026, the city, as Mike noted, is dividing the advanced pension payment into 2 equal installments in an effort to be responsible stewards of the city's cash flow. The first half was paid on January 16th, and the second half is currently planned to be paid mid-year.
Our Heather Sharon joins us now to break down the latest on the city's budget. Heather, why did critics of the mayor, why did they demand today's hearing before the city's finance committee?
Well, during the city's long, just concluded budget season, one of the major sticking points was how much the city was going to pay into its pension funds that it's not required to. Think about it as if you've got a lot of credit card debt and you're trying to pay down that debt by paying more than the minimum payment. The city's minimum payment on its pensions is nearly $2.8 billion. And this is designed to send an extra $260 million to that pension fund to prevent the situation from getting even worse.
So why did the city only make half of the required extra payment to the city's 4 pension funds?
Well, essentially, the city didn't have the cash, the alder people heard today, in part because Cook County has been incredibly slow in getting the city and other taxing districts, like school districts and libraries, the property tax revenue that they rely on to pay those bills. And, you know, sometimes you've got a lot of bills due on the 15th of the month. The city has a lot of bills due in January, and that created the cash crunch. This was not Budget Director Annette Guzman and Acting Chief Financial Officer Steve Mahr said, an effort to thwart the will of the City Council, as some critics of the mayor had suggested.
So the mayor said last month the city might have to make emergency cuts, including layoffs, if revenue that is baked into the city's 2026 spending plans fails to materialize. Do we know whether that's going to be necessary?
We don't know much about the city's larger financial picture. There are still lots of questions about the debt sale ordered by the budget and the gambling in city taverns that is also counting on. So there are still a lot of unknowns, but at least perhaps some answers about the city's pension crisis.
Okay, Heather Sharon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It is all at WTTW.com/news.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
President Donald Trump is re-upping his unfounded claims over voter fraud, maintaining the 2020 election was stolen from him. In a new escalation, Trump is calling for Republicans to take over voting in at least 15 yet-to-be-identified states. And the FBI recently seized election ballots from a center in Fulton County, Georgia, as well as voting machines in Puerto Rico. This, as a new version of a voter ID bill, is being considered in the U.S. House. Joining us to talk about all of that and more are University of Illinois Chicago law professor Hugh Mundy and Jacob Braun, executive director of the Cyber Policy Initiative at the University of Chicago. He's also the former acting principal cyber director under the Biden administration. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. So starting with these election fraud concerns, Jake, I want to come to you first. Is there reason to doubt the validity of the 2020 election?
Absolutely not.
Very simple question. Very simple answer.
No reason to doubt it.
Okay. Was there was talk of this country called Russia that that did somehow manage to infiltrate our elections. Remind us what we know about what happened there.
So in 2016, we know that the Russian government scanned multiple voter registration databases throughout the country, including here in Illinois. Cook County was actually one of the first ones to be discovered. We don't have any evidence that they changed any records or votes or deleted people from the files or anything, just that they scanned the files and then stole the data, so exfiltrated the data and sent it back to Russia. And
no evidence of them doing anything similar in 2020?
There is no evidence of any foreign interference to election infrastructure since 2020, or since 2016.
Foreign or domestic? No.
Correct.
Correct, okay. Hugh, the Constitution specifies that elections are governed by the states, that Congress has the right to set laws around the elections.
Right.
Is what the president's calling for, federalizing the elections, is that even legally possible?
The short answer is no. I think this is another attempt by the president to sort of undermine public trust in the integrity of elections, and also to sort of justify what's going on in Fulton County to the extent that the search warrant has been executed within the last few days.
Should people be concerned, or how should we perceive it, that the country's director of national intelligence is overseeing what's happening in Georgia?
Yeah, I think we should be concerned. I think this is an attempt by the president to justify things like the SAVE Act, which are less about integrity of elections than disenfranchising voters. And by making these kind of outrageous proposals about federalizing elections, I think he's making more palatable the idea of something like the SAVE Act, which again is problematic, even though, as you said, Congress does have the ability to pass laws around state elections.
Jake, what is the security benefit to having states administer and govern elections?
There's a series of them, one of which, maybe the most important, is that we have multiple jurisdictions. There's about 8,000 jurisdictions in the country. Both parties are in office in different states and so on, and so it's really hard to claim that one party stole an election if both parties are administering elections in 8,000 jurisdictions across the country. Separately, it's really hard for one entity to come in and wholly hack the entire election infrastructure for one candidate when you've got 8,000 little jurisdictions around the country that are administering these elections.
Hugh, the Trump administration so far, we know they've sued 20 states and the District of Columbia in a bid to see those voter rolls. Why are states resistant to hand that information over?
Well, again, because this is the Constitution says this is a highly decentralized process, and I think states should resist. I think what we're seeing in terms of the search warrant is an escalation of these attempts, because the other attempts were civil in nature, and now that the FBI has executed a search warrant and a judge has determined that there's probable cause for a violation of federal laws, it makes it, I think, more difficult to resist those efforts, and so that's why I think we're seeing the sort of law enforcement piece of this process.
There's been reporting from Reuters that found the Trump administration investigated Puerto Rico's voting machine, citing research as reason for the seizure. The government's probe did not find evidence of foreign interference. Jake, why an investigation at all?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the research they cited was research that we conducted at DEF CON, the world's largest and longest running hacker conference, where we looked into voting machines and identified vulnerabilities in those machines. The vulnerabilities are not new in any way. These, again, we disclosed these over a decade ago. So why they're pointed to these specifically right now is unclear. Again, there's vulnerabilities in any mechanical device that exists, whether it be your toaster, your iPad, or a nuclear weapon for that matter. And so highlighting the existence of these vulnerabilities doesn't really suggest that there's anything new to address.
What does your research show about those vulnerabilities? What are they with specifics to voting machines?
So first off, voting machines are hackable like anything else. You know, when the election officials ask the vendors to make voting machines, they ask them to do two things: make them cheap and make them able to count votes, not make them able to withstand hacks from, you know, the Chinese government or ransomware attackers. And so they are what we paid for. We paid for cheap devices that can count votes, but they're not very secure. And so you can get at them remotely, you can get at them physically and change things, but also the software that ties it all together is not secure, and that can be accessed via the websites of local election officials and so on, and can get into the voter registration databases, as well as the software that programs the machine. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities all throughout the equipment, which is why we've been calling from the beginning to have folks vote on hand-marked paper ballots. That's the #1 most secure thing you can do for any voter, for any election jurisdiction in the country. Have voters vote on hand-marked paper ballots.
Secure, but we also remember the hanging Chad and other situations from the year 2000, which I think was the catalyst that sort of led to some of the voting systems that we have today. Are paper ballots as reliable when it comes to the validity of the vote?
Sure. So there's been a lot of progress that's been made from pregnant Chads and dangling Chads and dimples and all those things. The Scantrons that exist right now to count the paper ballots are pretty accurate, and certainly as good as anything we had back in the 2000s. And what we solved with the Help America Vote Act in 2000, in many ways introduced a whole host of new vulnerabilities and problems that we're still fixing today.
Hugh, if 50 states, and I think Jake mentioned, what is it, 8,000 voting districts or voting areas in the country. Does that not leave room open for a lack of equity or fairness, right? If in Illinois, a bunch of us can vote early, right. Not often, but in Illinois, but in Mississippi, for example, early voting almost does not exist without very special circumstances. Is that fair to have this patchwork of voting systems across the country?
Well, I think something like the SAVE Act, which is at least purportedly an attempt to standardize some of these pieces, is going to result in more disenfranchising voters just by putting requirements on that some people simply can't meet, perhaps by virtue of not having a driver's license. So, again, the Constitution is very specific in terms of decentralizing elections, and to the extent that something like early voting exists, I think it increases access to voting at the most local levels.
That said, is there not room for the federal government to implement something that everyone across the country would have access to? For example, everybody gets early voting and mail-in balloting.
Absolutely. The federal government could do that if it chose. I think this notion of this kind of federal takeover or nationalizing elections, whatever that means, is far different from Congress coming in and creating laws to standardize these processes.
Briefly, a report from MIT found that 58% of Democrats voted by mail in 2020 compared to 29% of Republicans. The president is also calling to abolish mail-in ballots. Jake, I'm going to come back to you. Security concerns around mail-in voting?
No. In fact, it's one of the most secure ways because it's a hand-marked paper ballot. And, those ballots have to get to the entity, usually the county that counts the ballots, one way or another. On election day, somebody takes the the box that the ballots are in and drives them over to the county to count them. With absentees, the post office delivers them. So there's not really any infrastructure reason why mail-in voting is any less secure than voting on a hand-marked paper ballot on election day.
Can't hack a mail truck.
That's right.
Okay, you have to go out of your way to steal it, which of course would be a federal offense. All right, that is where we're going to have to leave it. Hugh Mundy and Jake Braun, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Up next, some Illinois lawmakers are pushing for a pilot program for self-driving vehicles. That's right after this. Self-driving vehicles could be making their way to Chicago and eventually the rest of Illinois. A new pilot program being proposed by state lawmakers would allow companies like Waymo to operate in Cook, Sangamon, and Madison counties with autonomous vehicles for 3 years. The rollout's been met with some concerns over safety after the vehicles passed school bus stop signs in Austin, Texas, and struck a child in Santa Monica, California. Joining us now are Ronnie Gonzalez, Special Representative for IAM Union Midwest Territory, a mechanist union representing workers from different sectors of manufacturing. And on Zoom, Josh Witkowski, lobbyist for ABATE of Illinois, which stands for a brotherhood aimed toward education. The organization provides legal resources for motorcyclists in the state. And State Representative Cam Buckner, whose district includes Bronzeville, Hyde Park, and the South Loop, he's sponsoring the bill. We also reached out to Waymo. They declined to join us, but did send a statement. We will get to that shortly. Gentlemen, thanks to the three of you for joining me. Representative Buckner, I'm going to come to you first. Why did you propose this legislation?
For a number of reasons, Brandis. We know that if you look around the country, this autonomous vehicle legislation is moving through state houses around the U.S. And what I am really concerned about is making sure that Illinois is ready for this technology if we decide that it needs to come here to this state in a permanent and an all-inclusive way. And so what this legislation does is it creates a pilot program. It's a 3-year pilot that gives us the opportunity to put a certain number of these cars on the street to figure out the data when it comes to safety, to figure out what we're doing when it comes to some of the liability issues and the labor issues. This is for lack of a better term, a test drive to see that this technology works for Illinois and for the future.
Josh, what are some of your concerns with autonomous driving vehicles?
Our concerns are primarily with oversight and disclosure of data. That so far, Waymo technology has not been independently verified. And when it comes to oversight on them, the legislation that we've seen pass in other states doesn't allow to recall them off of the roadway, and it doesn't allow for full disclosure as to what's going on. They're demanding access to public roadways to test against public drivers. We should have disclosure of the data, and we should have oversight.
Representative Buckner, what do you say to some of those concerns?
I think those are valid concerns. Josh makes some very good points, and this is part of why I truly believe we have to study this in a way that gives us an answer on how we move this technology forward. If we decide to move this technology forward, it's very important to know that these vehicles, while self-driving, they're not self-regulating. We got to have those conversations in Springfield about how to do this the right way. And so I actually share those same sentiments. Anything that happens in this space, in this conversation, has to have data and safety and privacy at its core, and I hope that we can get there.
Ronnie, you're a leader in the Illinois Drivers Alliance. You're trying to unionize rideshare drivers. How would the introduction of self-driving cars, how would it impact your efforts?
Yeah, thank you. It would definitely have a negative impact immediately to displace rideshare drivers. And our concern in the labor world is that technology has been coming into the workplace for decades now. And, we'd be foolish to say that it can't and it's never going to come. So we want to make sure that drivers have a voice and are active in legislation if it's going to pass.
Is this, do you see this as sort of the next sort of progression in this, sort of disruption of transportation, right? When Uber and Lyft first came onto the scene, cab drivers, taxi drivers were really upset, right? And we see far fewer cabs on the road today. Do you see something similar happening if Waymo or something like it is much more popular?
Yes, absolutely. Public transit could suffer. Rideshare drivers, especially, it would have a negative impact. And those workers want to participate in the economy of the state, and they earn money here in this state by giving rides to passengers, and they also spend their money here. If a tech company comes in and has autonomous vehicles, those robot taxis are not going to spend their money here in Illinois. It's going to get siphoned out. So we want to make sure that it's not a danger to our economy either.
Representative Buckner, supporters say that this technology, it's the future in Illinois, could be left behind if the laws are too restrictive. Do you think there's a way to implement this technology but still support the Illinois economy?
Absolutely. Number one, listen, this is about not getting this done fast, but getting this done right. And I agree with the concerns I heard earlier about making sure that we are not upsetting the labor force and the marketplace. In fact, I am a chief sponsor on the bill that would unionize rideshare drivers here in the state of Illinois. I'm a huge transit advocate. All of these things fall into my wheelhouse here, but it's important for us to make sure that we're doing this the right way. 29 other states have done this. But Illinois has taken a different posture, right? California did not do a pilot. Texas did no pilot. Arizona went straight into deployment. We're trying to take our time here and get this right. And I think we can find that balance.
Ronnie, same question to you. Would you prefer to not see self-driving and autonomous vehicles here altogether, or do you think there's a way to bring them here but still support the economy?
I think it has to be done responsibly, and that's what we ask of legislators, to make sure that we're not just a test track for them, that it's done safely and considers workers' positions, and that they are not displaced while this happens.
What would that look like upon implementation?
Driver transition programs, education, a 1-for-1. If a driver naturally, through attrition, retires out of the market, that one, autonomous vehicle could replace them. So to say it's not going to happen is foolish, like I said. That it happens responsibly is what we're looking for.
Josh, Waymo promotes that their cars are safer than human drivers, and we know humans make errors on the road all the time. We did receive a statement from Waymo. It reads, quote, "Our technology can make Illinois' roads safer and transportation in the state more accessible. The data shows our vehicles are involved in 10 times fewer serious injury or worse crashes and 12 times fewer injury crashes with pedestrians compared to other drivers where we operate." Josh, what do you make of that? Because I know that you have concerns over the information from Waymo.
Absolutely. If you go to Waymo's website, I encourage everybody to do it. Go to safety. You'll see a phrase that says, "Learn how we choose what data to include in our reports." Basically, they cherry pick their numbers. If you take a look at the numbers that they're reporting versus the numbers that are reported to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the numbers that are being reported in California, it doesn't match, it doesn't add up. Additionally, they're using some very curious modeling as to what they determine the vehicle miles traveled by humans would be in making those comparisons. If you want further proof as to how their modeling's a little messed up, when they hit the young lady, the young kid in California a couple weeks ago in a school zone, they did a model where they said a human driver would have been doing 19 miles an hour through a school zone. Now, every human driver I know, when they see small kids in and out of vehicles, slows way, way down. So there's some serious concerns with how Waymo presents data.
What kind of changes, Josh, would you like to see in the proposed legislation?
So Beta of Illinois has worked with a couple of sponsors to introduce our own version of legislation. It's House Bill 4789. And in our version of legislation, it requires the public disclosure of every collision that the vehicle has. It requires identifying numbers on the vehicles, so when we see those social media posts of Waymo's behaving badly, like being stuck on a trolley track, we'll know what unit is messing up. And then Waymo would have to publicly disclose the unit, the incident, how it occurred, and how they're going to fix it. And that way you can track the actual progress with real data by unit, by area of operation, and maybe those of us that are in traffic safety can all work together to make the product safer overall, because right now it's not happening. 10 years of development and we're still having very serious issues happening on the roadways.
Representative Buckner, what protections do you think could be worked into the legislation so that riders and anyone who is not inside the Waymo vehicle, anyone who is around it, other drivers and of course pedestrians, that they are all protected?
Yeah, it's extremely important to me that we get this part right. When we know that we have vulnerable road users who will be sharing the roads with these AVs, folks like bicyclists and motorcyclists and pedestrians. CTA buses will be sharing the road with these folks. And so we got to make sure that we get this right. I think many of the issues that Josh bring up are very important, and we got to find a way to make sure that folks are protected and that we have a process by which to do that. And listen, this is all part of the process. It is very good that we're having this conversation publicly to figure out where we are. We're doing things that other states have not done. And so I truly believe we could all come to the table and find a balanced way to move forward.
So just about out of time. At a Senate hearing last week, Ronnie, Chief Safety Officer for Waymo said that the cars are provided guidance by remote operators, but they don't remotely drive the vehicles. In fact, some of the operators are in the Philippines. 30 seconds. Your concerns about that outsourced labor?
Yeah, the fact that a company operating here in the United States and is using outsourced labor obviously is a huge problem. The fact that this company is making money and they're not doing it from American workers and contributing to our economy is just disturbing.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. I'm sure there's more to come on this issue. State Representative Cam Buckner, Josh Witkowski, and Ronnie Gonzalez, thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And that is our show for this Monday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Blue Sky at WTTW. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, righting the heaviest wrongs for more than 40 years.